The season has ended and we're pointing our view to next year. The 2022 cars have been driven one last time at the postseason test outing in Abu Dhabi. These test drives hinted at what's to come for the cars in the upcoming season. As usual, there are a few regulation changes, especially after a year where we've seen some major regulation changes. Today, we'll break down which changes are coming next year, and some teams are not happy about all the changes. With so many modifications to technical regulations in 2022, there were bound to be complications. These rules may have been in the works for years, but when you have 10 teams comprised of some of the world's most innovative designers, you're bound to unearth stuff that the FIA missed. The Aston Martin rear wing is a prime example of this, which was clearly not in accordance with the standards. The teams also discovered certain things by chance, such as the porpoising. This has not affected all the teams, and some have clearly found it to be a bigger issue than others. Yes, we're looking at you, Mercedes. So which changes are we bound to see in 2023? And who do you think will end up on top after these changes? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below after you finish the video. First off, Pirelli will have an additional tyre to choose from for each race. The harder tyres in the lineup poorly performed this year and will be replaced with an even harder tyre next year. So there will be a total of 6 compounds, ranging from C0 to C5. This will be one of the biggest changes. Next to adding an extra compound, Pirelli have tried to make the tyres for next year a lot better. As this year, they showed us that the drivers relied too much on tyre strategy instead of racing. We'll be on the lookout for this when the 2023 cars hit the track. Some of the other car changes will be crucial aerodynamic modifications. The key upgrades for the 2023 F1 season concerns the car's floor and aim to eliminate porpoising once and for all. The FIA claimed that safety was the primary motivator for these improvements, but this claim was challenged by several teams. The parties have since achieved an agreement, and the World Motorsports Council has approved the rule modifications. Raising the floor's edges. The FIA originally intended to increase the floor edges by 25mm. However, this has since been decreased to 15mm. This follows loud protestations from F1 teams who've already dealt with porpoising and can thus simply lower the ride height. In addition to the 15mm increase, tests to measure vertical deflection are being introduced. By 2023, a maximum deviation of 5mm in both directions will be permitted. Currently, the maximum allowable deflection for a downward force is 8mm and 12mm for an upward load. The FIA intends to make it more difficult to seal the underneath of the car by limiting the deflection of the floor, which is combined with the higher edges. Raising the floor's edges will make it more difficult for teams to physically seal the Venturi tunnel from ambient air pressure. Increasing downforce from the bottom of the car is now achievable, but there is a risk of restricting airflow and inducing porpoising. The Venturi tunnels are slots beneath the car that generate downforce by accelerating the air beneath, creating a low pressure zone due to the Venturi effect. The effect is to suck the car towards the ground while producing only a small amount of foul air behind the car. Diffuser throat expansion. The throat is the narrowest point of the underfloor tube. The pressure shift occurs at that point, speeding airflow and creating downforce. The throat is located at the back of the tunnel, immediately below the driver's seat. The last few millimeters of space between the throat and the ground can see an exponential increase in airspeed. However, at some time, that gap can grow too narrow, causing the flow to stall. The FIA wants to raise the diffuser throat to make the car's underside more tolerant to fluctuations in dynamic ride height. Weight changes. The car's minimum weight will be reduced marginally. In 2023, the minimum weight will be 796 kilos, down from the 798 kilograms in 2022. This modification comes after the minimum weight for the 2022 Formula 1 season was raised after most teams struggled to get the car to weight. Front wing rules are being tightened. During the Canadian Grand Prix weekend, Mercedes created a stir by unveiling a stunning front wing, outfitted with several flaps designed to increase downforce. However, the FIA will allow less freedom in front wing design in 2023, implying that such an extreme design would most likely not be seen again. Roll bar alterations. Following Guan Yu Zhou's frightening collision at the British Grand Prix, roll bar adjustments were considered required after the component proved unable to endure the impact of the crash and broke off as a result. The part must be able to endure greater loads as well as a 15G collision with the ground. Furthermore, beginning in 2023, the roll bar must be capable of withstanding both forward and reverse forces. Another safety improvement will be made to the mirrors. The surface areas of the mirrors will be raised to improve blind spot visibility and braking circuit definition. Some of the other minor car changes are vertical force sensors with high precision. Starting at Spa-Francorchamps, sensors designed to capture the impact of collisions will detect the vertical forces of the bodies. These sensors will thus serve a dual purpose for the rest of the season, but in 2023, dedicated sensors will be installed to monitor vertical forces more accurately. Temperature of the fuel. The FIA decided to propose a rule adjustment after fuel temperature issues surfaced many times during the 2022 F1 season. Whereas the fuel must not be colder than 20 degrees Celsius in 2022, it must not be colder than 10 degrees below the ambient temperature beginning in 2023. In cold weather, a minimum temperature of 10 degrees Celsius shall be enforced. A weather service designated by the FIA will record the ambient temperature 1 hour before a practice session, or 3 hours before the race. Use of tyres during qualifying. Things will also alter during the 2 qualifying sessions next year. Drivers will be obligated to use particular tyre types during each segment of the qualifying session as a test. The overall number of tyre sets allowed throughout a race weekend will be reduced from 13 to 11. Drivers will be given 4 sets of softs instead of 8 during the 2 qualifying sessions for this test, while the amount of mediums and hards will be upped from 3 to 4. During each stage of qualifying, drivers must use a different compound: the hard tyre in Q1, the medium tyre in Q2, and the soft tyre in Q3. Next to these changes, there will also be some changes on the grid, with the following 3 changes something to be on the lookout for in 2023. Sprint races. As previously announced, there will not be 3 but 6 sprint races in 2023. This was also the FIA's initial plan for the 2022 F1 season, but the governing body was unable to achieve an agreement with the teams on it. The amount of sprint races in 2023 will be double that of 2022. Curfew. Adjustments to the curfew rules will also be modified to provide more relaxation to F1 teams' mechanics, given the tight calendar. The curfew will be extended to 14 hours before the start of FP3 in 2023, up from 13 hours now. It is planned to increase to 15 hours by 2024. There will also be fewer exclusions. Friday exceptions will remain the same. They'll be granted twice a year, but the number of exceptions on the days preceding will be drastically reduced. On Wednesday, 8 exceptions are currently permitted. This number will decrease to 4 in 2023 and then to 2 in 2024. On Thursdays, the number drops from 6 to 3 in 2023 and then to 2 in 2024. Penalties on the grid. Following the significant misunderstandings surrounding the implementation of grid penalties for the Italian Grand Prix, it became evident that the FIA needed to revisit the applicable rules. As a result, the governing body issued a new version of the regulations for both 2022 and 2023 on October 19th, clarifying the use of grid penalties. Drivers with grid penalties of 15 places or less will be assigned a temporary starting position, equal to their qualifying result plus the grid penalty. If 2 or more drivers are placed in the same position, the order will be determined by qualifying timings. In that instance, the driver with the slowest time will maintain his current place, while the driver with faster times will pass him. Following that, drivers with no grid penalties will be assigned the unoccupied starting positions in the order of their qualifying results. Drivers with grid penalties will be moved up to any unoccupied starting spots following this allocation. Drivers who have more than 15 grid penalties must start behind every other classified driver. If this applies to multiple drivers, the qualifying results will be utilised to establish the order. Drivers who did not set a time during qualifying but were given permission to start by the stewards will be assigned a starting position behind all classified drivers. The classification in FP3, or FP1 if it is a sprint weekend, determines the relative order in this case. If a driver does not have time to his name owing to a disqualification, he will start after racers who did not qualify for other reasons. Furthermore, starting 2023, the rule will be that no more than 5 grid positions will be penalised for replacing gearbox parts. In 2022, it looked that the timing of gearbox changes could affect the sequence of issuing grid penalties, but this should be resolved by next year. When changing numerous parts, the maximum grid penalty will be applied to one part instead of a sum of penalties from each part. Now you're up to speed with all the rule changes coming up for the 2023 season. Which of these changes surprised you the most, and which one will change the outcome of the races the most next year? So, who will come out on top next year? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We can't wait to see what the cars will look like next year.